We have Matt Sennott joining us this morning from the East Side Corridor Group. Is it a group? Kind of a group?
Neighborhood group about the East Side Corridor, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, so I'm glad to have you, and there's a whole lot of conversation to have about this, but maybe give us sort of the background first, what this is, and then how you got involved, and then let's talk about what really the message you're trying to get out.
Sure, you bet. And thanks for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to come on the show here and talk about this. The East Side Corridor is a proposal for a north-south route east of town, and it's been talked about before. It came up in the early 90s, and in fact, in 1995, there were some studies done on this proposal for this north-south route east of town. Basically a belt line. It's synonymous with belt line. Not too many people know what the term corridor, but that's exactly what that is. It's a belt line, it's a highway, and the purpose is to move traffic quickly around a town, and so that you don't have to take interior roads, and the purpose of that then would be to make this a 45, 55 mile an hour highway. The problem is just with the location. The concept is sound. We don't have anything on that side of town. We don't even have grocery stores, gas stations. We'd love some developments out there on that side of town. But taking a 1995 plan and adopting that to a 2023, 26 is when this is supposed to take place, the building of the road, it's, in our opinion, short-sighted. Now, this is a city and county project. The city owns some land on that side of town that they're trying to do this. The problem is, 25 years later, Owatonna has grown. And we have neighborhoods there on that route.
And they didn't exist at the time originally when this was being looked at. So this was probably it's further outside of town.
Correct.
Kind of situation, okay.
Yeah, back in the day, it was considered somewhat outside of town. Now, there was a lot of comments from residents in 95 saying, still, this is a little too close. It probably should be pushed out a little bit further. The city did that, at least proposed, we can move it out a little bit. And that's the route that we're talking about today, but it was determined and abandoned at that time as a project, saying it's just too close.
Back in the 90s.
Back in the 90s,
okay.
Yeah. Well, actually, early 2000s.
Early 2000s,
At that point, the county abandoned the plans, turned the land back to the city, said, we're not going to do this. And MnDOT actually recommended against that route as well. That's against our neighborhoods out there. They said, 34th Avenue, which is about a half mile further down the road east, makes a lot more sense for this. And that's what we're recommending today, is to use that route east of town. It's a half mile away from most of the larger residential developments.
Okay.
And that seems like a very good solution. But for whatever reason, that's not where we are. We're talking about a pretty old route right now.
Okay. Yeah, and I think, I feel like a lot of stuff changes in 20-something years,
Absolutely.
So now you and people in your group, do you live in this area that we're talking about?
We do, yeah. It's myself and several other residents, many other residents in the neighborhood called North Country Estates. It's on the east side of town out there by the nursery, Turtle Creek Nursery. There's also affected neighborhoods north as well.
Okay.
And, we're going to be connecting with those groups as well here pretty soon to kind of have that unified voice to come to the city, come to the county, and have discussions, if they'll have those with us, to try and encourage them to consider a little more long-range planning and 34th Avenue as being a solution just a half mile further down the road. 30 seconds down the road, basically.
Yeah. And how big a neighborhood are we talking about that you're part of?
Our neighborhood alone is 150 homes.
Gotcha.
And there's 20 homes that would be directly impacted with having this highway in their backyards, basically, right on the property line.
Okay.
And the problem with that is, and this isn't a case of NIMBY or not in my backyard.
Right.
You hear that a lot.
Yeah.
We anticipate that there would be a residential street back there.
Sure.
That still hasn't been built. Our development was built in 2004.
Okay.
And back there was platted for a residential street. And
that's the road you're talking about now that would become
Now they're wanting to make it a highway, and that's where we're having a rub with it. So it's not a NIMBY situation.
Right.
It's just, to impose that type of road now on an existing development south and then existing developments north. It's just not safe. 26th Street, 218, those roads existed before the developments came. And so the developments were kind of tailored to the situation where they were moving. And so I don't think you're going to have a lot of families with really small children, moving to have a highway in their front yards.
Right.
But by doing this and dropping the road on existing developments, it's a concern because you do have a lot of families in this neighborhood and
Right.
on the backyards that would be directly impacted. In fact, it's just feet from our swing set, for our kids.
Right.
And I've got 4 kids, 2 young kids. And there's a lot of people with backyards impacted by this and small children that are playing back there all the time.
Right. Well, so when you think about, and you mentioned that, so that residential street wasn't built, it was planned but wasn't built, so it's not, there's probably not a savings involved with utilizing an existing road, which is kind of what I first had in my head, is maybe there's a street that, we only have to double the size or whatever, but so that didn't get built.
No, there's no
Okay.
existing road there. However, that road I talked about earlier, 34th, just a half mile down the road, that does exist. And
Okay.
it was a minimum maintenance road years ago, so that right-of-way already exists. The road bed is intact for the most part. Now, it's been tilled under in some areas just because it wasn't used very much, but that right-of-way still exists and it's owned by the county. It already crosses Maple Creek, too, which is a whole other issue with some of the archaeological concerns up in that area. And
Okay.
as a matter of fact, the Minnesota Historical Society has recommended against the road next to our neighborhood called 29th Avenue if it was to be built, and said 34th would make a lot more sense because there's already a crossing across Maple Creek up there. There's some concerns with Native American settlements and artifacts and things like that.
Oh, sure.
And anytime you break new ground over something like that, you never know what you're going to find, and it could increase the cost of the road or just completely kill it anyway. And now we've paid tax dollars studying this route when it was already recommended we move it down the road.
And what kind of money are you talking about cost-wise for this project?
This is probably, I think, by the, you can go out to the county website and look at the plan. I think we're dealing with about $20 million, $19,507,000, to which almost $10 million, or a little over $10 million, would be on the taxpayers through sales tax revenue and other local taxes.
Okay.
So this is a substantial cost. And again, from a safety issue, we've got big concerns with this, but from a fiscal standpoint, and utilization of tax dollars, we're really recommending a little more forward thinking and forward planning and moving that out to 34th Street so we can have maybe some commercial developments, zone residential the way it's supposed to be.
Something closer to home. Like you mentioned, you don't have gas stations or
we
grocery
always have to
stores
go to the west side of town or up on
to do that.
26th. Yeah.
Well, what would happen? So, say if it did get built just as it is, so you have a backyard fence maybe that you're looking over, and then there's a highway, or how does that work?
That's another concern. And so back in 2004, when this plan, or in the late 90s when this plan was abandoned for this highway at this location before our development even existed, when it was turned back over to the city, in 2004 they built these residential developments here.
Okay.
And at that time, the city sold off 50 foot of this land that they owned. So they had 150-foot right-of-way back there.
Behind the houses.
Behind the houses,
Okay.
yeah. Aside from the backyards there. And they sold 50 foot of that to the developer to build the neighborhood. And so now there's houses on that. And so all they have left is about 100 foot. And to try to squeeze this type of road in 100 foot, the only type of mitigations that seem to work, even if they did have 150 foot, would be a sound wall. And the
big giant
walls. The big giant walls you see,
Yep.
Minneapolis, St. Paul, and for something like Owatonna, that just doesn't. We don't want that.
Yeah.
Now, to protect our kids and to reduce sound, for the entire neighborhood and neighborhoods around, that would be probably the only option. But we don't want that.
Right.
We don't want that sound wall back there. It just detracts from Owatonna's beauty. That's why we moved here. We got all these parks and lakes, and nature's huge, in community. And anytime you build something like that, you're not going to, you miss that community too.
Right.
It's not just the site of it, but you miss what's going on the other side of that.
Sure.
Who are my neighbors? And you lose that. And,
Yeah.
and we don't need that in Owatonna. But with this type of road, that's kind of our only option if this is built.
If
quite
it's
honestly.
built where it's currently being looked
Correct.
at. I wonder what the cost difference would be if it were a half a mile east. I guess we don't know, but if you're not utilizing existing road, then there's probably not savings by doing it there where this plan is, but,
Sure.
so I wonder if there would even be a cost difference. I wonder, that might be a good option to move it.
I mean, that's
half a mile
we
east.
we don't see why that wouldn't be a more cost-effective solution. There's already a crossing at Maple Creek.
Oh, and you said the parts of the road are already there.
Yeah, parts of the road already exist. Only 1.5 miles of that route are not developed or built yet.
Okay.
The other piece is already there. And so it would just be expanding that a bit. It doesn't, bisect farmland. That's the other thing. I think of just from the farmer's perspective, this 29th Avenue next to these neighborhoods would bisect farmland and create some issues that way. With 34th Avenue out half a mile east, it's already along property lines. It's already a right-of-way. And so it doesn't bisect farmland in a weird
Right.
way. So I think the hardships on farmers would be a lot less as well.
Well, tell people, before we run out of time, I want to make sure you can tell people how they can get involved and help, or how can they,
Absolutely.
how can people get involved?
We'd appreciate any help, we can get. We've set up a website, Owatonna eastsidecorridor.com.
Okay.
On there is, if you really want to get in depth with the details of the project, we have all those documents on there. But there's 2 links on there especially that I would encourage other residents and citizens in Owatonna and Steele County to click on. One is a link to our petition. So we have over 200 signatures, with trying to get our voice out about the concerns here. The other one is a link where we can email our representatives here in town, on the county and the city. And so all you have to do is click on that link. Pre-floods in some text for you. You can change it up if you want to, but it has all the addresses, email addresses of the people who make the decisions with regard to this project.
Good. Okay. Well, good. So hopefully people can reach out to you and you can get the story out more. And I appreciate you coming on and sharing it with me. I've, a little bit of a distance from it. So to me, it didn't, I was like, oh yeah, there's going to be a road out there, but it's good to hear from the people that would be directly impacted.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're not out there and you don't live close to it, it's easy to kind of lose sight of what's going on.
It really isn't
Yeah.
in my backyard. So,
Right. No, I
yeah.
appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much, Matt, for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.